Hey, this is a video tutorial covering some of the patches for week 2 of MUSC 4400, Music and Digital Signal Processing. This week we're covering some control objects, and especially control objects that we will use to create complex FM synthesizer timbres. And the word timbre just means changing sound color or harmony in our case this week. So if you open up your folder, which you can get from the Canvas site, and this first patch just kind of shows the objects that we'll use this week: the message object, the delay object, the metronome, the line and line tilde objects, which are ramp generators, the select object, and the pack object. So once you have control over these, just 6 or 7 objects, you can do a whole lot of things with Pure Data, because these are the objects that tell Pure Data what to do in terms of numeric values and when to do them. Okay, so as we move forward, we're going to first look at the line object. And line is an object which creates a ramp between 2 values in real time. So when you give line a message, you give it a message with 2 parts. Part 1 is where you want the ramp to end up, and part 2 is how long you want it to take to get to that point. So we use line when working with control rate values, so just numbers that we could see that don't have to be calculated at a really fine grain. And then we use line tilde for controlling audio rate values. And things that are calculated at the audio rate are higher fidelity. And when we're actually listening to the result of these calculations, we want to use the higher fidelity calculation. Okay, so here's an example with line, and it has 2 messages attached to it. Notice that messages have this little right side cutaway compared to objects, which do not have a cutaway on the right side. Each of these messages has 2 parts. The first value is where we want the line to end up, and the second value is how long we want it to take to calculate that. So when I click 100, 500, line is thinking to itself, okay, where was the last value that I was asked to calculate? So I haven't clicked anything, so 0 is where it will start. I will create a ramp from 0 to 100 over half a second, 500 milliseconds. Zerp, there it goes. So I can visualize this with a horizontal slider even better. And you can do that with put Shift Command J, or I think Shift Control J on PC. So if I click this again, it's going to go down to 0 over 200 milliseconds, and now 100 over 500 milliseconds. And the cool thing about line is it's really optimized to be used live. So if I were to click this value, and before it gets to 100, click this value, line knows to recalculate the ramp based on its current output. So I can kind of go back and forth between these really fast if I want to, and never allow it to finally get up to 100 before I click, go back down. So that makes it a really nice kind of volume control in particular. So over here, it is possible to kind of stack messages to send to line. So when you make a message that has a comma in it, it really separates that message into 2 messages. The first one followed by the second one. And in this case, the first one only has 1 value. So that tells line to just go ahead and jump to 50. So with a 0 millisecond ramp. And then calculate a ramp from 50 to 100 over 500 milliseconds. So you can see every time I click it, it starts at 50 and then calculates a ramp up to 100. So if that horizontal slider again, you can really see how that works. So these can be anything. So I could change 50 and I could change this to 10 and I could change this to 1500 milliseconds. And you can see it's calculating that ramp from 50 to 10 over 1.5 seconds. So down here, I'm using line tilde to control the frequency of an oscillator. Then I'm multiplying the oscillator's output by the output of another line tilde object. And that is controlling the amplitude of this oscillator. So in this case, I have 0.95 and 0 as the goals of my ramps, and each one is taking 100 milliseconds. So I'll go ahead and set my oscillator to a low value, 110 hertz. Now I'll fade in and then fade out. So you can see that little 100 millisecond ramp creates a kind of like a comfortable fade in. If I were to set this to 10, let's hear the difference. You can see it's very abrupt. If I set it to 0, you can really hear the almost like a little snap when it happens. So that's one of the reasons you might choose to use a little bit of a delay, or rather a little bit of a ramp time when controlling amplitude, so you don't get that slightly unnatural snap. You might want that snap, so it's no big deal really. I'll fade it back in, and then I can control the pitch with a little bit of a ramp too. Now over here I combine this fade in and fade out messages controlling line tilde with two delay objects, and then I use a bang to trigger everything. So first I'm using this bang to tell the output of the system to be written into this table using tab right tilde. I've got delay 100, so I click this, first it says start writing to the table, wait 100 milliseconds, trigger the fade in, wait 500 milliseconds, trigger the fade out. Let's see what happens. So you can see a very quick fade in, 10 milliseconds, then it waits for 500 milliseconds, and then kind of a longer fade out of 400 milliseconds. So all of these values can be changed if you go into edit mode, and Control E or Command E is how you do that.